what to expect, but for sure you can expect a sparkling of innovation or new ideas, challenging or provocative positions. And this is good for a conversation because it's a way to enlarge our own horizons. So we are still waiting a few minutes for other people to come, and then we will start.
When we're speaking about technology, one of the big things that happens is that half of the technology, half of the big giants are actually Asian. They're not white. We don't see them because, again, Western media talk about social media, Elon Musk versus Facebook, Zuckerberg and stuff and so on. But again, the biggest social media are actually Chinese, Korean, Japanese, bigger producers, again, all the brands, cars and so on and so forth. So that presentation is actually not taking into account basically half the world.
I think the Africa is the big exclusion from this global framework. Send the video on the first edition telling the story of this event. Starting. My name is Susanna Cafaro. I'm the organizer of this conference on supranational democracy, the Supranational Democracy Dialogue. Anche solo di mezza giornata e invece abbiamo avuto più di 30 risposte, quindi sembra che faremo 2 giorni di evento per dare spazio a tutte le idee interessanti che sono arrivate.
Ma tutti italiani?
No! La cosa incredibile è che gli italiani ce ne sono pochissimi, sono quasi tutti stranieri e alcune delle voci più interessanti vengono da altri continenti.
I'm very excited to be in this conference on supranational democracy dialogue that really questions this space that is above states and the question of politics. Can we have politics at that level?
I'm very happy to be here in this supranational democracy dialogue, which I wanted to take part to and saying what I believe that the new technologies have a global impact on our world, on our planet.
As someone working in citizen engagement, governance innovation, the law, when you hear of a conference called Supranational Democracy, you want to go.
My contribution today is around rights of nature the idea of being in the midst of an earth renaissance that we're all feeling as humans in our bodies, in our DNA.
It's been a wonderful opportunity over the last 2 days and a really amazing time to bring together not only academics, but also activists, thinkers from a whole range of different subjects to look in the broadest possible way at what is supranational democracy and why do we need it.
Io vorrei fare un intervento che serva a inquadrare l'argomento, a far sentire tutti parte dello stesso discorso, quindi a dare anche una cornice, e allo stesso tempo che semplifichi il tema e che quindi consenta anche al pubblico di entrare in argomento e di capire cosa intendiamo per supranational democracy.
Supranational democracy is essential if we want to deal with a number of political and existential even issues of the world which the states cannot deal with on their own, and if we want these solutions to have the legitimacy of citizens.
The future of supranational democracy is one that is indicated already by the SDGs, and I think that the Committee on World Food Security is an example of that dialogue aimed at addressing the root causes of food security.
The question basically is how to get there. The need is obvious. Global problems need global solutions. How do we get rid of nuclear weapons? How do we deal with climate change, etc.?
Whoever is working on this concept should take into account these technologies and how they will develop, because they will have a huge impact on the world. So I was very happy to take part in this dialogue and to see all different kind of informations and speeches, because the supranational democracy is such a wide and deep argument, and there's so much work to do.
And that when we talk about supranational democracy, that we need to think about ourselves as nature, as a part of the global body that is Earth.
Perché questa parola sovranazionale che cos'ha di particolare? Perché c'è un motivo se abbiamo scelto sovranazionale e non internazionale o globale. L'ho intitolato così: Supranational Politics, The Time Has Come. È arrivato il tempo della politica sovranazionale. Mi sono ispirata a una citazione che mi piace tanto di Victor Hugo, che dice: niente è più potente di un'idea di cui è venuto il tempo. Perché se ci pensate ci sono state delle idee che in passato sono state giudicate folli semplicemente perché non era ancora il tempo.
We're going to start by talking about some problems, most of which won't be particularly news to us, but as a means to frame the discussion. And then we're going to talk about some innovations and prospective solutions to some of these challenges.
I will give you an example of the speech which I'm going to give tomorrow, and which concerns refugees. And I know that the issue of refugees in Italy is quite hot, as it used to be in Greece. It is still in Greece. I'm trying to invent a solution that will no longer deal with the refugee issue as a national issue, but will transform it into a European political solution.
The alienation of the populace, we're familiar with the unfulfilled promise of the Arab Spring, which itself was caused by failure of the status model of development, and Malik and Awadal at Oxford did excellent work on this in showing that the state's attempt within the Middle Eastern countries to maintain extensive control over political and economic as well as financial decision-making, and reluctance to let the private sector or the social sector develop robustly, as well as the demographic shifts amongst Arab youth, contributed to the revolutions, and the fact that the institutions were weak to begin with created problems as well. So we see here again an instance of where an impulse towards promoting rigidity leads to greater fragility. Disputed elections and the rise of extremist groups, we've discussed this as well. failed secession movements, Catalonia, Iraq. This has been mentioned this morning in the acute refugee crises.
A possibility to perhaps turn the argument, the criticism of lack of democracy in the international arena on its head, and instead for a call for a renationalization of authority, which is the main claim that the nationalistic populists are putting forth, that we could turn that argument on its head and explore whether it might be more feasible and more to the empowerment of the ordinary people to instead develop avenues to democratize the international order. So bring a real democratic development forth into the supranational world as well.
And I realized that the government that I was a part of wasn't particularly well equipped, wasn't really agile enough to address those concerns, and really wasn't particularly interested, or was maybe too self-interested. And I don't think it's a radical thing to say in a room like this one that our current democracies are not always very responsive to emergent concerns and new ideas from people. And so I felt like it was a time to look for something different.
So the interconnectivities of the goals makes the interconnectivity also of the actions in a way. And this is what we as UNHRD are doing. And the conflict have a tremendous impact on the food insecurity. On the other hand, the food insecurity has a tremendous impact on the conflict. So we talk about a circle, and this creates also internal displacement. It creates migration. It's all interconnected.
I see the path towards universal democracy as a long one, but one that can be accelerated through disciplined bottom-up approaches that leverage the use of technology with the rights-based approaches of political philosophy and the multilateral institutions to create more inclusive and more beneficial institutions and societies for all of humankind.
Un modello che sia non di cooperazione internazionale ma sovranazionale. Cosa vuol dire? Vuol dire la creazione di una dimensione politica non tra le nazioni internazionali ma sopra le nazioni, sopra gli stati, cioè in grado di avere una legittimazione, una responsabilità e un'inclusività sua, che viene dal basso, viene dai cittadini, non viene dagli stati. Quindi così come gli stati hanno una loro legittimazione, hanno una loro responsabilità, hanno una loro inclusività, gli stati, le regioni, le città, così anche il livello globale dovrebbe avere direttamente legittimazione dai cittadini.
The idea of supranational democracy is not only to have a supranational level, but to have a multi-layer system of collective choices.
And the way that these digital systems ought to grow should be consistent with the international agreements which have established norms regarding rights and goals around which there was broad international agreement, not just from states but from the global citizenry, and which were often created in a very participatory way, as we've heard earlier. And digital tools afford a new mechanism to track and drive progress towards those in such a way that not just governments and multilaterals ought to be accountable for driving us towards them, but the global populace should be as well.
And we've had this thing called Earth Day happening. It's a global phenomenon, but still we're coming against the 50-year anniversary in 2020. And have we made progress in understanding what it means to be in relationship to the Earth? That's the question. So let me share my frustration when I was 10 years old looking at the Earth going, oh my God. I was being fed stories through the newsreel, through the media, through television, and it was all about the men who landed on the moon. But I wanted to see the Earth. So here goes the narrative. Man's great, conquering, this great victory. And it gets even more profane. Look at this ad where man is just propped up and he's got his Heineken or whatever it is. Forget the Earth. Here's what it's about. Well, in my view, I'll just land right into my thesis here, is I do believe in that moment that an Earth Renaissance began. It wasn't one about books destroyed in the libraries of antiquity. No, it's something more intimate, more primal than that. It's that which we come from.
Questo ci apre una serie di problemi. Abbiamo un mondo preparato alla dimensione globale non solo dal punto di vista del commercio, degli scambi, della comunicazione, ma anche del dialogo politico. Quindi le organizzazioni internazionali che esistono sono già attrezzate, possono essere attrezzate o vanno completamente reinventate.
Really questions this space that is above states and the question of politics. Can we have politics at that level? And I think that today we can easily see that countries are failing to handle so many of the problems that are harming us. And I think that some say, oh, democracy itself is problematic, but I think that trying to let local democracies, trying to handle global issues is just not working, and we need to then extend democracy beyond the state level.
So there's a way we all have to shift our identity quite fundamentally to believe that we're all in the same boat, and identities are actually much more flexible than we think. We can expand it and we can contract, we can regress. So, we have to get this inner revolution going on at the same time as we're doing the outer revolution, because if not, we are just, we're acting in reaction.
It is very likely that for the time being, it will be a complementary legitimacy strain which accompanies democratic legitimacy through states and through a democratic governance on sub-state and regional or local level. But in the long run, I think humanity needs to find a way to build up global systems of governance which then need legitimacy not only through representation by states, but also in some way or another by legitimacy through representatives of citizens, of people.
And so the question that is really my main concern is, how do we get citizens into this process in a binding way that drives politicians towards implementing and cooperating on real global solutions?
Civil society and non-governmental organizations, and you know, Mira, all about that, representing smallholder, family farmers, fisher folks, herders, landless, urban poor, they've all come together to create a mechanism and a network that feeds into the work of CFS.
That's kind of the idea, that's the same spirit that's behind the Shared Nation platform. Shared Nation's vision is to build a perpetual engine for group co-investment in solutions to global commons problems involving all people. And let me parse that statement a little bit. Perpetual engine refers to the idea that what we get people to do in Shared Nation is to combine their money together every month. People pool what they have every month, and then they make a decision about what to do with that. Co-investment refers to the idea that this isn't sort of a version 1.0 crowdfunding platform where people give their money to lots of diffuse projects and ideas, and people can sort of give to anything that's listed. We force ourselves to make a decision every month.
We can choose to foment this democracy, see it as a cultural question that has to be fed through institutions and through people, but we really have to start by attending to individual wellness and social ecologies in community again.
Shared Nation is an attempt to respond to that. It's a bit grandiose, it's a bit quixotic. I own all of those things for sure, but it's an attempt to say, yes, we're in seriously difficult times. On the other hand, We're more connected and have more technological infrastructure than we ever could have imagined 20 or 30 years ago. And we have an opportunity to combine now in ways that we never could have imagined combining before. And that's what's at the heart of this idea, is combination, is coming together as we never have before with our resources and with our time to actually try to change things in the world around us. That's at the heart of this idea.
È venuto fuori un bel programma, perché si va dal generale, l'evoluzione della democrazia dalla dimensione locale a quella globale, fino all'Europa come laboratorio di soluzioni democratiche sovranazionali, passando per una serie di global issues, di temi globali.
Then we started discussing on the need of nutrition. It's not only, the food is not only the thing that makes you survive in terms of alimentation. How do you say it? I'm just inventing a word. But it's also nutrition that it's relevant. Now, to maintain the nutrient inside of food, which are key for pregnant mother, for little kids, etc. We need also to work on keeping them well stored. So in the lab in Brindisi, in our small lab, we created this insulation that is now used everywhere to keep the temperature at the right level. And so we were fine, we store it. And then we start thinking, okay, but from the moment the suppliers send this nutritious food to the moment we get it, are we sure that the temperature is correct? So what we are working now is this silver thing that you see here. Transport the food, the temperature is kept to the right level to maintain the nutritious. But when it arrives on the field, in order not to create garbage, if you open it, and this is the tea that you see there, each of the pieces can become a mattress or can be used to insulate a prefab. So those who receive the food not only receive the food, but also receive other items. So we are trying to reduce the waste. These are as example. So this can be transformed in a cradle. And because a family can also have other children, we put a blackboard. So while the little one sleeps, the other can draw. And this we have done with UNICEF. So we are working with them.
We developed a blockchain-based label and tag that they put in all the clothes designed by this designer, Martin Jorgaard from the Netherlands. And it's a pilot project. She is a very small designer. She has a small supply chain. But they managed to follow the product from the farm where the cashmere was developed until the very end of the production, influencing the designer practices and choices. On the same line, we see that Avery Dennison, that is the biggest label producer in the world, is using new technologies and engaging in creating immutable digital profiles on the blockchain and put them in labels. And finally, we have some initiatives from the industry, such as the HIG Index, that was developed by the Sustainable Apparel Coalition, and that gives measurable criteria for addressing sustainability performance, assessment, reporting, and it's really widespread among the industry, and it seems that it's becoming slowly a generally adopted global standard.
So, in my opinion, with this fourth industrial revolution we started just a couple of years ago, there are at stake political and social issues, and the effect will spread on all social dimension and also on individual level. So this process, of course, involves different social, political, economical, and cultural actors. Just because what I said, if technologies are developed by large corporations only, if there are no regulation, that can be a bad issue. But I believe it is possible to imagine and to design new policies, and what better than some supranational democracy or supranational institution able to do that. So I believe the positive outcome will depend on how we will address on a political side these issues on a planet scale.
Emphasize the principle of democracy before universality, and that avoids this problem of confronting a UN Charter. So it allows the European strategy. It allows you to start with a smaller group, the democracies, and then progress stage by stage to the final goal. And following the European example, the first stage should probably be some community of democracies.
Because if people see global agreements functioning and they can see the benefits of them, they're going to want to formalize it. And that's where the world federalism, I think, comes in. So what we need, apart from simultaneous implementation and other things I'll come to in a moment, is a way that we can allow citizens to compel their national governments to cooperate. And one possibility is what I've been experimenting with for the last 18 years since that Sunday lunch with my family, called the Simultaneous Policy, or SIMPOL for short, Politica Simultanea, I think it would be in Italian. So how does it work? You could say that, what is it about? It's about using our votes in a new way to drive governments to cooperate to solve global problems. How to make global agreements successful and how we can make it happen. SIMPOL has two sides. It's a policy, or a range of policies to solve global problems, but it's also a process. First, as a policy. So it's a range of global policies to be designed or strongly influenced by citizens. Okay, it's not going to be designed by corporations or politicians, it's going to be designed by us, by anyone who signs up to SIMPOL. And it can include only those policies that nations cannot implement alone. Okay, so it doesn't touch national policies like, I don't know, housing or education or any of those things, because those are things that are within the national purview. They are within the national sovereign domain. Things like climate change, re-regulating financial markets, corporate taxation, getting rid of tax havens, all of these things actually that are really important are now in the simultaneous domain, we could say.
The solution, as I see it, is to create some kind of federal world state that is an idea that is actually not very new. At the end of the Second World War, there have been Einstein and Gandhi, and there have been a huge movement that was demanding a world federation.
We will ever get, we will be able to pass some sort of global regulation on transnational corporations if we really democratize global decision making. Like, that's really the fundamental only way. And the only way to change that graph is to do that.
For us, supranational democracy is a way to give the people the right to have a say on issues which cannot be dealt with by their states. It requires a change in mentality, a change of paradigm if we want. It requires to move from what one would consider to be national citizenship to what we could qualify global citizenship, with global responsibilities, global solution, and global accountability.
And I think this would be the first, hopefully, of many conferences and dialogues in this way, and it's really been an honor to be here.
Well, I think that maybe we can open this session. What do you think? So, Marco Boemi and Eili Kuru, would you kindly come here with me? Don't let me alone, please. So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this fourth and final session of the fourth edition of the Supranational Democracy Dialogue. I'm very happy to be here, first of all, because there are lots of friends and colleagues standing in this beautiful place, and secondly, because we are in Brindisi, that is my new hometown, and it's a city that I love very much. And last but not least, because there are also many students that have come here, Erasmus students as well, so I'm very happy because our message will reach other countries. They came from France, Germany, and somewhere other countries. I'm not Albania, so okay. There are different horizons that we are going to break this afternoon. Well, the fourth session is very important to me because when we were discussing about the program with Susanna, and we decided together that there was something missing in this dialogue at a certain point, and it was the idea that we cannot talk about democracy, peace, common values, common goods, without involving in this dialogue citizens and civil society. And this is the reason why we decided to add this fourth session that is called Civic Engagement as a Tool for Peace and Democracy. The idea, the word tool reminds us something very concrete, very that is linked to action, and it is something that will emerge, I think, from this afternoon conversation. We will have different topics that will be discussed, and let me share with you some keywords that have come to my mind when reading the abstracts and the expertise of my colleagues. I think that we will have the chance this afternoon to reflect on engagement, empowerment, citizenship and participation, civil society, peace and democracy, of course, but also on human rights and freedoms. So now I don't want to take much time, and I'm very happy to introduce you Professor Eiríkur Bergman. He is from the Bifrost University, that is in Iceland, a very exotic place for us. He teaches politics, and his research interests are mainly participation, democracy, of course, negotiation, conspiracy, and European integration. He wrote a lot of books, articles, and today he will share with us his very interesting presentation that deals with deliberative democracy in wake of crisis. So the floor is yours. Thank you very much for coming.
Is it on? Now it's on. Wow. It's very... Ooh. All right. I'm afraid you won't escape hearing me. It seems to be very strong. I'm very happy to be here, returning in this project. I was one of those in the first one, as you might have seen in the video there. And I want to speak today on issues that I have been developing actually since we last met 4 years ago. This time on sort of cases. There are several cases of deliberative democracy, which in my mind is the greatest novelty that we have been seeing in the realm of democratic development over the past few years and decades. I think there is an undercurrent going on around the globe where instances are being built into decision-making, democratic decision-making, which include increased citizens' participation through deliberative bodies, and that this kind of evolvement in the world is being underreported at the moment. There is a lot more going on than is perhaps acknowledged in mainstream media and hardly in academia either. I have been studying several cases where a crisis, a polycrisis of some sort, has opened up space in societies, re-examining the very foundations of what these societies are built on. This is what is sometimes referred to as a constitutional moment. And in several cases, we have seen countries and international institutions opening up the dialogue to citizens' participation, and that collectively we are seeing an alteration in our democratic systems. I'm just going to run through a few cases here. The 3 cases I've been studying is Iceland, my own native country, Ireland, and Chile. All of these countries have instigated bodies of deliberative democracies in wake of crisis. And it so happens that I have been somewhat involved in all of them, to different extents though. And therefore, I thought I would be well suited in comparing them. And then I would like to take that knowledge and try to mirror that onto the international arena and see whether we can find any comparisons, for example, within the European Union. And that sort of relates more to the discussion here in this forum. Just a little context. Democracy is not something that has been developed into a final form, and from that point onwards it's set in stone and won't alter. Democracy is something that takes shapes of its time. And we can distinguish between many waves of democratic involvement, and here are just a few of them. I mean, obviously, the early days of democracy, which we most usually associate with Athens, some sort of a direct democracy of those that were considered to be citizens of the Athenian state. That kind of democracy died off, and democracy was resurrected in a representative form, coinciding with the French and American revolutions and the sort of social upheavals in the 19th century. And then we can say that another form of democracy had developed in wake of the Second World War. That's our current liberal democracy, which most Western states are based on. But I would argue that a new wave is arising in the form of deliberative democracy. Whether it will amount to similar revolutionary change as the previous ones, I can't predict at the moment, but there is an undercurrent there. And let's just just pause for a moment on what the liberal democracy of the post-world order is. It is, of course, based on the representative democracy developed in the 19th century, obviously, but there are also international aspects weaved into our democracies, the liberal democracies. The problem is that, like Susanna and others here have been discussing, is that they lack democratic representation very often. And there are many aspects that have been driving this change. When the Berlin Wall came crashing down on that November night in 1989, many predicted that this kind of liberal democracy would from that on prevail as the sort of lasting form of public decision-making in the world. And famous book of Professor Francis Fukuyama, The End of History and the Last Man, sort of mapped that out. Well, history wasn't to be that rosy or simple, but we also witnessed several counterwaves against the liberal democratic order that was established in the post-war era. And those waves also started earlier than with the downfall of the Berlin Wall. The first counterwave of illiberal populist democracy started already in wake of the oil crisis of 1972 with the rise of, for example, Jean-Marie Le Pen in France, the progressive parties in Denmark and Norway, so on. And the second wave, I argue, arose in wake of the end of the Cold War, with, for example, a quasi-populist at least coming to power in this country here, Jörg Haider rising to power in Austria, so on and so forth. And I will argue that the third most meaningful wave arose in wake of the financial crisis of 2008. The argument put forth by nativist populists is that the liberal democratic order is flawed and that the international part of it should be rolled back in some sort of a process of renationalization of politics away from the international order. I argue that we can turn this argument on its head, and instead of rolling back the liberal democratic order and its international components, that we could rather augment the liberal democratic system with participatory bodies, which is sometimes referred to as mini-publics. And there is a lot more going on in this arena than we often think about. Here are just few examples where we have seen constitutional forums being set up with civil citizen participation. Australians in 1998 established a convention debating their relationship with the British Crown, and they decided to keep the relationship with the Queen. But this is still an interesting exercise in gathering citizens to debate a sort of fundamental existential question like that. There were other exercises being held in Canada, in British Columbia and in Ontario, where randomly selected citizens were gathered to debate electoral law reforms. We have seen these types of exercises occurring in the Netherlands, in Belgium, so on and so forth. And the three cases that I am analyzing here are the Constitutional Council and the National Forum of Iceland in 2011, the Irish case of a constitutional convention which was gathered to deliberate on constitutional change in 2012, 13, and later assemblies that were established later on, and then the all ongoing, perhaps the most far-reaching and ambitious example of all, which is the ongoing Constitutional Assembly in Chile, which is due to deliver its proposals for a new constitution for Chile in July, after having worked for about a year on that. And then I think we should acknowledge that a lot of these exercises that are taking place in sort of citizens-driven participatory democracies are taking place elsewhere than in the Western world. A lot of these exercises derive from Latin America, in particular from Brazil, where participatory budgeting process has been implemented into municipal and council decision making in many cities and towns, deriving from the first exercise in Porto Alegre in south of Brazil in '89. And this has sort of snowballed through the South American and Latin American continents and around the world, and are being taken up in many places. And then I would argue that the current conference on Europe, which is consuming at the moment, and other European initiatives undertaken by the European Union, can be examples of similar kinds of participatory deliberative democracy if developed in that direction. So just a little bit about these cases. What's interesting to me is that in these three cases that I am examining, and many other of these cases where the most ambitious exercises have been implemented, that they have been brought on by bottom-up protest movements that have been successful in pressuring authorities, governments, of instigating citizens-driven bodies. And what they have in common is that they arise in wake of crisis. I am the example that I know most about is my own native country, Iceland, which had its crisis of 2008, and although the economic severities didn't prove to be as severe as we felt at the time, we still experienced a sense of real crisis in Iceland, and that opened up an avenue to re-examining the Icelandic constitution from the ground. And the government agreed on a three-phase process in that regard. First, to gather a randomly selected forum of 1,000 citizens that would debate values for the coming constitution. Then they installed a specialist committee of 7 politically party-appointed specialists into a committee that held sort of the professional organizational things around it, and then a national election of private citizens. So these were individuals that were nationally elected, and they were the only criteria was that they would not be affiliated with political parties. So political parties were banned from fielding candidates, and rather these were individuals who came forward, and there were 25 members elected. There were 523 candidates, so this was a bit of a mess. The international media, especially the New York Times, described this exercise as the first crowdsourced constitution because of the active participation of citizens also in the drafting process with inputs and things like that. That was never a sort of accurate description of what was going on, but amusing nonetheless. Yeah, here are the steps, and I was one of those lucky ones to be elected onto this Constitutional Council, and you see me there on the end, and strangely enough in red trousers. I don't think I have worn red trousers before that day or after it, but it's there, yeah, on that painting. Similar thing occurs in Ireland. What's interesting here is that a citizen-driven initiative by colleagues of mine, political scientists, who convened in Ireland and established what they called We the Citizen, which was a sort of bottom-up driven forum for debating the foundations for Ireland. And similarly, a citizen-driven initiative is taken up by the authorities, and the new government coming in Ireland decided to call for the Constitutional Convention, which had the task of debating very limited number of articles for the Irish Constitution. And the Irish Constitution has been changed in several instances now through this mechanism. And you might have heard news of, for example, a constitutional ban on abortion being removed in Ireland. And that was one of the things coming out of this mini public of randomly selected citizens who suggested that removal. And there were several other changes that have been made to the Irish Constitution. The convention in Ireland was very innovative. There were 66 randomly selected citizens, and then 1/3 of the forum were MPs from the political parties in Parliament. And I remember that I was on one of those discussion panels leading up to the Irish case, where we were brought international group of specialists coming in to deliberate before they were setting up this convention in Ireland. And I remember sitting in Dublin in a very prestigious hall debating this and warning of mixing professional politicians in with the citizens in the Constitutional Convention. And most of my colleagues there agreed with my concern that the politicians, being professional debaters, would manipulate the whole situation and make sure that what came out of the convention would be their will rather than the citizens. I am glad to report that the exact opposite happened, actually. The politicians refrained from pushing their own agendas, really, in the debates, and they rather became the facilitators for the debate among the citizens themselves. This was a marvelous thing to see, because they were, of course, very skillful orators, very skillful in sort of formulating ideas and articles and things like that. So they would help. They would also become like rapporteurs for their group's discussions. And vitally, what happens and this is a distinction between Iceland and Ireland, is that when the proposals were then put to Parliament, there were advocates for the process in the Irish Parliament. The 33 MPs active in the citizen panel, they became the sort of promoters of the proposals within Parliament. This we lacked in Iceland because there were no politicians, no members of Parliament involved there. And that's one of the reasons that the Icelandic draft constitution was received much more coolly in the Icelandic parliament than in the Irish. So that's one of the lessons I'm putting forward to my countrymen at the moment, that we should restart this process and involve parliamentarians in with citizens. And now there is this ongoing convention in Chile, which is highly interesting. They are about to conclude now in July. So it's not timely enough to discuss that in much detail. But what's interesting to me is that you have all of the same components. You have social upheaval in 2019. That was brought on by what we could view to be less severe situation than the financial crisis of Iceland in 2008 or the euro crisis in Ireland in 2009. There was a minor hike in bus or public transport cost in Santiago de Chile that brought on this protest, but obviously there was a lot more sort of unrest underlying. And this was just the tip of the iceberg, and protest movements took to the streets. And nationwide discussion occurred, and the same happened, that the government pressured by the people, took on the task of instigating and revision of the Chilean constitution, and that's in Chile very sort of difficult backstory around the fascist regime of Pinochet and his constitution and all of that. Okay, so let's not dwell with that. But there are these similarities that I have been drawing, and we can just leave these slides by saying that up until now, Ireland is the only success case out of those three, although Chile has not finished its course, and there is still at least a weak hope for Iceland sort of starting its process. So, but what then about the international? Can these undercurrents, these democratic innovations that are happening in nation states and in sub-levels of nation states, can they bring forth any lessons for the international? And I maintain that, yes, there is similarities that can be drawn. And if you look at the European level, then I would say that the main reason why the European Union is received with, let's say, with less than a lot of passion by many of the European citizens is precisely because it is entirely elite-driven. All of its institutions are elite-based, whether it's the council, the judiciary, and also the parliament, which is, of course, just an elected body of parliamentarians which, by default, become part of what we consider to be the elite. And there are not many instances where ordinary people can participate on the European level, apart from programs, things like that, which are not necessarily democratic in the nation, although they allow for participation, like on educational levels and research levels and all these things that many of us, for example, participate in, but they are not democratic. But the European Union has implemented some instances, weak attempts for citizens' engagement, and one of them is, of course, the European Citizens' Initiative, which allows for, I think it's 1 million citizens that are needed to put forth a proposal, which there is no guarantee what happens with. But then we also have the Conference of the Future of Europe, which is ongoing and is just finishing on Monday, if I'm not mistaken. There you have a lot more of these components of real citizens engagement in what we can consider to be mini publics of the European populace. The demos is being kind of mirrored in these randomly selected mini publics, and they are thematic panels of 200 randomly selected citizens, and then we have the plenary. And there is a backstory here as well. This is not being set up in complete isolation from the history of the European Union. We also had the Congress of the European People, as it was called, running from 57 to 62. Then there was a convention relating to the setting up the Charter of Fundamental Rights. And then, of course, the failed convention on the future of Europe in 2002-2003. These were all attempts, as weak as they were, for citizens' engagement. I think we can revert back to the Athenian style of democracy, of random selection by lots, the sortition practice that they used in Athens, where citizens were randomly selected to debate issues. In, for example, you see the picture here of the Klerochian, or however it's pronounced, I don't know how to pronounce it, which was a mechanism for randomly selected citizens to debate the issues of their Athenian republic. And those methods can be used again to, and I want to be very clear on this, to augment our representative liberal democracy, not to replace any part of it, but build into it other instances and components. And I would argue that a permanent European Citizen Assembly, or that is a permanent structure for randomly selected citizens' assemblies, could help to restore legitimacy in the eyes of the European public, built-in participatory body for the European Union, and give it powers to bring forth proposals which are not just being treated as petitions from outside or some kind of combative result of referendums, but that there have been real citizens' debates behind proposals which are then put through the institutional processes that are in place. So that's something I think could be useful. And I would argue that it's not radical at all, and it's perfectly in line with what is being implemented throughout the world. For example, just in the German enclave of Belgium, they have put in place a permanent citizen panel to debate issues that adhere to that part of Belgium. Yeah. So this is my little contribution here in Brindisi, and I'm pleased to see that this press release coming out of the European Parliament, where they are at least, the parliamentarians, paying at least lip service to the results of the convention, but whether that will materialize into anything meaningful remains to be seen. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Erikur, for this very insightful presentation. I share everything you said. So I've been working on participatory democracy for a long time recently, and I really believe, as you mentioned at the very beginning of your presentation, that we have to perceive democracy as a process, as an ongoing process. There is not a fixed idea of what democracy is, and also we have to accept the idea that some failures may exist. Democracy is not perfect, but we can together act in order to render it more feasible and more adaptable to different societies. And I have so many things to say, but I will tell you only something, because another very interesting thing that you said was that related to the so-called citizens' agora, the citizens' assemblies, and there is a civil society organization that is Humans that is promoting now all around Europe the idea of having those citizens' assembly on a permanent basis in the European Union. And you all, as citizens, you can support this civil society association by signing their appeal, because they are asking the European Union to support this view. And this could be very useful for all of us. And last but not least, maybe we will come back to this issue during the debate, a few words on the European Citizens Initiative. That is the proof of the attempt of the European Union, I think, to embrace what you've called the bottom-up approach against the classical top-down approach. I know that there are a lot of shortcomings related to the European Citizens Initiative, but is an important step towards the promotion of participatory democracy in the context of the EU, and so at supranational level. Well, according to the program, now there should have been Colombe Caen Salvador and Andrea Venzon connected in streaming, but unfortunately we have no streaming, so they were not able to join us. But I would like to share with you a few words in relation to what they do. They are co-founders of the Atlas movement that is based in London, and this we may say this civil society movement is a global grassroots movement uniting people to create an equitist society. And in their view, an equitist society is a society promoting democracy, human rights and freedoms, of course, free, fair and sustainable economy, solidarity and ecologism. So it is an example, and it would be very, very interesting to listen from them how they promote these values all around the world, but unfortunately this would not be possible. But if you want, you can go on Google and look for Atlas, and you will be aware of all the activities that they promote. And now it's up to Mr. Marco Bohemi, that is on the left side, and I'm very, very happy to have Marco with me because we are friends. I may say that we are friends. We share a very important experience. For me, it was a pivotal one. For Marco, was one of the many, many interesting experiences he has in his life. Now Marco is a senior expert of a very important project, and he will tell us something more. This project is about the agro-Mediterranean project involving women, agro-food project involving women in different countries of the Mediterranean area. But Marco is not only a senior expert in this project because he is an evaluator of the European Commission, and he worked for the Swedish Ministry for Integration and Social Inclusion, for the Italian Ministry of Equal Opportunities, and I can say that you are an expert of diversity management as well. That is something very, very interesting. So, Marco, now the floor is yours. Please tell something about you, something more, because I cannot say very well everything you do, and tell us about this very interesting project you are following now.
Okay. See if it's working. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Claudia, for the presentation, and thank you to Unisalento to invite me. I try in my travels to be here. Actually, I was busy with another project in Croatia just yesterday, so I came and it was a pleasure to be invited to talk about these issues because it's really in my heart. I've been working as you said, with diversity and inclusion for, almost 20 years now, in several countries in Europe. My biggest experience was, for sure, what you mentioned, was in the Ombudsman against discrimination in Sweden. That is the most relevant, one of the most relevant organizations in the world. Remind you that the Ombudsman is an institution that was born in Sweden, so it's really an example of democracy. Is what we call in Italy a civil, civil protector of rights from the bottom and not from the top. So it's really close to the disadvantaged people and the discriminated people. And then I moved for 12 years, I worked for the Italian Ministry for Equal Opportunities, dealing with all the possible strategy, the strategy to fight against racism and the LGBT strategy as well. It was really something that I really implement for the ministry. And this project actually is something that I was written in 2018. It was an idea that came up from my experience, international experience, to do something related to export a model that I'm using since years and exporting this model outside Europe, because I used often to work within Europe and the European countries. And this project is to try to connect Europe to the other side of the Mediterranean. So to have a really dialogue, we talk about dialogue, really dialogue between the three, I can say, culture of the Mediterranean. We have the European part of the Mediterranean with the European countries represented there. We have the Maghreb area, And we have also the Middle East. And these three parts are really, really different for culturally aspects, but they have a lot of things in common. And the things in common I will show you is the situation of women in the labor market that is quite similar. So going from there, the project is about women empowerment in the Mediterranean Sea Basin, and involve few countries that I will tell you now. The program where we go, we co-funding was NECBC program, that is the program of the Mediterranean, and is a program from the European Commission. And the priority is to provide young people, especially those belonging to the needs and women, with marketable skills. So working really with the people that usually they are discriminated in the labor market, or they cannot get in the labor market because they don't have enough skills to have the chance to get in the labor market. The applicant is the University of Rome Tor Vergata, that I used to work with them in their department. And CESIE, that is the Center for European Studies, is located in Sicily. So Sicily is the region where we start to develop the project. So Sicily, Spain, Tunisia, and Palestine. These are the four areas where we are developing the project. The project starts in 2020, so really in the middle of pandemic situation. So that's make really difficult also, the development of the strategy, and develop also the possibility to meet the beneficiaries in the countries. The other three areas are, in Spain, we choose the Valencian community. In Tunisia, we are working in two regions called Beja and Medellin. And in Palestine, of course, we work in all countries, all Palestine country. And we have the pattern that you can see there. So we have a Kautar, that is a center for Arabic and training for women, Arabian women for training and research. And the Palestinian Business Women Association is a partner from Palestine. So as you see, the four areas represented in the map. And from the map, you can see how, we choose the area. They are really different from each other, but with a lot of things in common. And then we have a lot of also associate partners to help. We have the Ministry for Equal Opportunities in Italy, the Ministry for Women in Tunisia. We have the Ministry for Women in Palestine as well. So it's quite strong association partnership. We started... When I start to realize, and when I start to when I wrote this project, I started from and tried to figure out which was the poverty and the social exclusion situation when we talk about women in the Mediterranean countries. The first data that I got was really incredible, because from World Bank data saying that women's labor force rate is only 22%, so it's one of the lowest in the world. And the highest, of course, unemployment rate from this kind of region is only 90.6%. That is really, really low. The second data is about unemployment rates, definitely higher than men. Unemployment rate that is 41%. This is a ILO statistic. Third thing is about only around 12% of adult women are entrepreneurs. So it's really low numbers of women that can make a profit on themselves, that they have enough skills to make, from an idea to make a business, okay? And this was my point, It's not just to make them aware about, skills, improve their skills to get in the labor market. But the most important, I think, interesting things about this project is to make them entrepreneurs of themselves. So this is the real boost for them. No? Coming from an idea, they don't have the money to develop the idea, and we try to to be their incubator to make the idea profitable for them and to give also job to other women as well. So increasing the impact, the social impact for the area. We'll tell something about this a bit later. Why we choose the agri-food sector? The agri-food, we could choose a lot of sectors when we start to realize where, start and work with these beneficiaries. But the agri-food sector is something that links all the Mediterranean countries. They are really specialized, so region by region, with their own products, agri-food products. And this makes the project very interesting because from Palestine to Tunisia, we have a different, develop of products. And we are teaching them how to develop their products and to make the products as a business. So we choose this particular agri-food sector. Then there is a very low levels of women participation in the agri-food sector. Why? Because it's a legal market. We had a research. It was a research in the labor market, trying, because all the projects started with their research from the Tor Vergata University. And the agri-food sector is one of the most illegal markets where the people work illegally. So that means they have no rights at all. So there is a big exploitation about the women in the sector. So we wanted to make them aware. Mostly of the target group, they already worked illegally in the market. And they say to us, this is not possible anymore. I mean, and the pandemic make the situation even worse, the pandemic time. And the last thing that I'm connecting with the exploitation of the target group is that the gender-based inequalities are prevalent in the rural areas. So what we are doing, we are reaching the rural areas. So there are women that probably are very far from the cities, so they don't have any chance to go and participate to a training, for example. So we try to arrange also a transportation system for them with a bus that could pick up them from their houses and taking them to the training centers. Okay, so this is something that make the inequalities a big difference to the target group. So the focus, as I said, is young woman employment, including needs in the region of the project that I mentioned. The specific sector, as I said, was agri-food, innovative skill model. So we wanted to design a rural social innovation model to be tailored according to the local needs. And then the most important things is make all the beneficiaries will have two job profiles. One profile will be fitting the labor market, so we are going to increase their chance to get in the labor market. And second profile is making them entrepreneurs. So the general objective are, as you see, the indicators are number of women trained at 140. So there are 35 women per country selected. We took a lot of time to select the women that real believe in this kind of path, in this kind of project. And the indicator, the indicator too, is how many women trained who find a job is really high, if you see, because it's the 80%. This 80% is so high compared to the other projects. They usually have a really low numbers of indication of the impact in the labor market. Is because we have a sub-grants, as I said before, we have the chance to incubate the projects, the business idea in real business. So we are launching this month, in May, a new call for them, for the beneficiaries of 300,000 euros for their project. So we're going to boost the projects to a really business model. So I can divide the project in 3 different steps. As you can see, the research that I was mentioning, so adapting the rural social innovation model in different regional contexts, the training and the coaching part that we just finished 1 month ago. We finished all the trainings. That was a really long process because it took for us more than 1 year to train all the women. More than 800 of hours of training, going through different things, even, take a driver license for the women that they never had a driver license, so they can reach their work or they can do a business thanks to their driver license, for example. And then all the business model, all the business part that make them aware also that they have to face a new reality, and the business has not to be only in the small rural area, but open up, in the Mediterranean area. So working also with internet, new skills, IT, and e-commerce. So to sell the products all around the Mediterranean area, but also everywhere. Now is the globalization market, so they can sell the products wherever they want. And the last part was the job matching and job creation. So to organize also career day for them to match their competencies with the companies. I want to show you, first of all, last year we launched in June a big campaign in the Mediterranean to get the beneficiaries involved, and then to get also the companies involved to match beneficiaries with company. I can show you later when I finish the presentation the video that was a spot that was also on TV in different countries of the Mediterranean. We had a really large campaign. We work. I plan all the campaign for. I'm responsible also for the awareness campaign for the Mediterranean, and I work tight with the Department for Equal Opportunity in Italy, other stakeholders to launch this big campaign. And then in March, we had this winter camp in Jordan. So what we realized is that the pandemic time make them really out from the system, really out for connection, really out from the possibility to talk with other women that have other experience. So we decided to have a winter women camp in Jordan last March. We had a 1 week where we talk 60 women, so 50 women per country, forming really a Mediterranean dialogue. You see all the tables, you see all the women there. And in the beginning, when we started to arrange this winter camp, we thought, okay, there are problems, with the language, with culture. So probably all the 15 women will stay just all together in their community, and it will be difficult to really open up, for a dialogue. But it was incredible, impressive that there are no barriers at all. I cannot show you the image about the bus trip that we had to visit some companies there on the field, and it was crazy because they were all together dancing in the bus with the music, with the local also dancing. And this was really impressive because many of them there, they start to realize that they can have a business between them. So few of the projects will be, intersecate with each other to, open in other countries as well. So from there started real and dialogue, not just cultural and religious dialogue, because you see a lot of women, almost all the women coming from Palestine, they had a veil, and the women also coming from Tunisia, they had a veil, so they are from Muslim religion. So there is also, no barriers, cultural barriers in religion or language, but also no barriers in business development or business model. So this is really, really interesting. And then we visit a few farms to make, really, this was a really incredible farms, really big farms where they are producing almost all vegetables, all fruits around the region. And then we visit also the National Center of Agriculture. They met the director there and they asked a lot of questions there. So I want to show you the video before to finish, and maybe we go for debate. See if it's open up. This is the Italian version with the English subtitles.
E noi possiamo fare la differenza. L'impegno da solo non basta. Donne e uomini dovrebbero avere le stesse opportunità. Per raccontare una storia diversa, occorre il giusto sostegno. Scegli di essere la protagonista della tua storia. Scegli di esprimere il tuo potenziale e di seguire le tue ambizioni. Innovazione, crescita sostenibile e competenza sono le chiavi per il successo. Innovagro Womed ti offre un percorso di sostegno al lavoro e all'avvio di impresa. Per contribuire alla creazione di una società fondata sull'uguaglianza di genere e sull'inclusione a partire dalla filiera agroalimentare, per prepararti alle sfide del mercato ed entrare in rete con le altre imprenditrici. Innovagro Womed è la giusta spinta per realizzare il nostro sogno. Adesso riscrivi la tua storia, è il momento di trovare il tuo posto nel mondo del lavoro, oppure di trasformare la tua idea in un'impresa di successo. Invia adesso la tua candidatura. Visita cesie.org. Contatta international@cesie.org.
So this is a video that talks a lot about innovation, a new way, a new model of business, and above all also about rights, and about equality. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Marco, for sharing with us this very important experience. And this project gives me the opportunity, but those knowing me, they know that I used to talk even if someone doesn't give me any opportunity, but you give me the opportunity to reflect on other important things that to me are related to the promotion of democracy worldwide and the achievement of gender equality through gender empowerment, I think is fundamental in order to have truly inclusive and participate democracy. As you may know, gender equality is among the SDGs, is SDG number 5, and at Unisalento, actually, we are working on those issues because we have a Jean Monnet model that is about the promotion and protection of the rights of women as a tool to promote, first of all, women's empowerment. But the final point we think that must be achieved is women participation in democratic life of societies. Because in our team's view, we strongly believe that if women are empowered, and this may happen if their rights are protected, if they can effectively take part in the economic life of their countries, well, this is a tool to give them the true possibility to actively take part in democracies. Because if women have to think about all the problems, or they have to defend themselves from violence, and they don't have rights, it is more difficult for them to try to participate, to think about political participation, for instance. So those projects are very important, and those projects are the proof that EU funds can concretely contribute to change lives, because as you told us, this was a pilot project, but after the project there is the concrete possibilities for those women to have startups, no? So to becoming independent. So it is very, very important. And when you show us the pictures, and you said that there were problems because of language, culture, but I think that our shared point of view is that problems can become opportunities. So I think that is what happened there. And now we have to change the table. So males, please go back, and I want two wonderful women to join me here. So I want to welcome on this table Veronica and Sophia. Thank you once again, Marco and Eirikur, and stay here because after we will have a debate. So you can have a seat wherever you want. Before starting this new conversation, we have a video to show. This is of Willis Onajani from the Youth Cafe, Nairobi. And he was not able to attend, but he sent us a video. Welcome.
Greetings from Nairobi, Kenya. Africa Youth Charter from Nairobi, Kenya. Africa Youth Charter, Article 11 on youth participation, envisages that every young person shall have the right to participate in all spheres of the society through the facilitation and creation, as well as strengthening of platforms for young people to participate in decision-making at local, national, regional, and continental levels of governance. And similarly, providing access to information such that young people become aware of their rights and opportunities to participate in decision-making and civic life, among other ways envisaged in that charter. My name is Willis Onyango, and I serve as the Executive Director at the Youth Cafe. Today, it is my singular and distinguished honor to be part of the Supranational Democracy Dialogue happening in Brindisi, Italy. The Youth Cafe is a multi-award-winning, Pan-African, not-for-profit youth organization with its regional headquarters here in Nairobi, Kenya. Founded in the year 2012, since our founding, our strategy has been to look at today's youth birth in Africa as an opportunity for development and economic growth. Working across 8 program areas critical to Africa's youth, the Youth Cafe aims to enrich the lives of young people by modeling and advancing youth-led and right-based approaches for fostering community resilience, achieving sustainable development, attaining an equitable society, proposing innovative solutions, driving social progress, and inspiring transformative change. We do this by utilizing innovative research, policy and advocacy action. Now, the Youth Cafe's overarching goals around peace and security and that of governance and political inclusion are to achieve various outcomes. Key among them is to enhance the contribution of young people through their active engagement and maintenance, as well as increased advocacy for political stability and effective governance that can ensure that there is a transparent, democratic, and accountable environment. We have done this most recently through very
Okay, I think we can go on. So, now I have the chance to share this last part of this session with Veronica and Sophia. I will introduce each of them now in a minute, but I want to say that I'm very happy to stay here with them because they come from the eastern part of Europe. So their presence here is very precious for us because we have other perspectives, and in the context of a dialogue, having different perspectives is the essence of things. So let's start from Veronica Nikishenko. She teaches Russian in a foreign language school in Brindisi that is Forma Vobis. And I particularly appreciate this school because this school is now offering free lessons of Italian to Ukrainian people living here in Brindisi that were forced to leave their country due to the Russian aggression. And she's also linguistic mediator. So I think that she will share with us her idea about democracy, so her perspective, and we are looking forward to listen from you. Thank you.
Così? Okay. Acceso?
Yes.
Okay. My name is Veronica and I'm Belarusian. I would like to share my experience regarding the perception of democracy. It has been 20 years now since I first moved to Italy, and since the very first moment I felt a slight unknown sense of liberty. During this time, I had to learn what kind of thought people around me shared about ex-Soviet world. In fact, I started telling them that the political situation is different. The wind of change has finally arrived, and that liberty and a refound sense of consciousness was on the rise. Unfortunately, in recent years, I had to face the reality. This change was mostly an illusion. The greatest wake-up call arrived with the 2020 presidential election in Belarus, when the idea I had of my country completely collapsed. Violence, bloody repression, and illegitimate arrests were perpetrated by the state. And I felt so shocked that I could barely believe that such a terror would really take place in my homeland. Russia had first intervened in Kazakhstan. Then February 2022, with its horrifying events, arrived. Until the day before, I had been receiving calls and messages from students and friends who questioned me if war could be an actual outcome. But I responded at the time was that war was such a distant, absurd path that it was unlikely to happen. I felt like speaking that way because Ukraine is hotly connected both with Russia and Belarus. For we have Ukrainians, friends, partners, or family residing there or in our own city. Also, in the widespread image, we have in our minds Second World War memories are still vivid. As you all may know, Eastern Europe was severely affected. In Belarus, 30% of the local population died, and still today we have not yet reached the pre-war numbers in terms of population rise. There is no family that did not lose someone. What I used to feel was that war was still an open wound, something that must remain a memory. Then the war began. Misery and destruction was delivered to Ukrainians, our neighbors. There is nothing left for millions of people, no past, no future, no bright hopes for upcoming events. Common people have been thrown into the nightmare against their will. Ukrainians are not only fighting for themselves and their own rights, they are standing up for the liberty of every man and woman in Belarus and Russia. On the social media and mainstream media, war is the biggest news. It has most of the shares, and we hear people talk about it 24/7. War, violence, deaths, and hatred. When you hear about displacement and violence, when you are confronted with such a mass of cruelty, hate is what you feel. But we should never let hate take over and overwhelm our hearts. Hate is easy. Love is the most difficult. Trying to figure out what is happening and giving sense to it seems mostly impossible. Open confrontation is hard, but we must look for pacific, open dialogue at any cost. This is the road we must pursue. I think that everybody has the right to choose how do they want to deal with it. On my side, I have chosen to listen to each other. As for me, it is the only solution to hear and to love in order to help prevent damage. The bigger distance of opinions, the stronger must be the effort to understand. Hatred brings hatred. Love brings love. Everybody must choose. After all, what kind of choice do we have left? Thank you.
Thank you, Veronica, for this message of love, of brotherhood, we may say, and we hope also of hope. And the history of your country can teach us for sure something, is that we do not have to take democracy for granted, because threats are always behind the corner. And I think that we tend to forget this. But in this, a very important role is that played by citizens and civil societies that are very important in order to act as watchdogs for governments. And what emerged is that at the very, very end, unfortunately, is the civilian population the only victim of wars. Your message give me the possibility to introduce another guest, another friend of us, that is Sophia Ryback. Okay? Your surnames are the most difficult of the conferences. So, Sophia is is now working for an IT company that is Star Global in Lviv, Leopoli, we say in Italian. So he comes from Ukraine, and she's an expert in visa application center, and she is going to share with us her experience in the field of freedom of movements of people, we may say, in relation, of course, to Ukrainian people. And we are very happy that you are here with us, and please share with us your experience. Thank you.
Thank you so much for inviting me and for letting me speak. Today I'm going to talk gradually from the past, how easy it was for Ukrainians as well as other third country nationals going abroad. So firstly, you needed to apply for visa. So even if you are planning to visit your friends or to attend some conference like this, being a third country national, you need to first apply for visa, which means that you need to have more days in advance, because processing time is at least 10 working days. Then you need to pay visa fee, you need to collect all the documents. And what is very important, that depending on the embassy, the process is different. So there is the general visa code, which provides you information what documents are required, but then each and every embassy has their right to add something extra, or I don't know, additionally add mandatory translation of all the documents if they are not in English or in the language of the country you are visiting. But what is also important, that visa doesn't grant you entry to the country. So the final decision is up to border officer, who is checking your visa, which is like the first step for you to enter the country. But then anyway, you need to follow all the rules. So you need to show that you have enough financial means, which also depends by country. And this is the another stage, because, for example, from 2017, Ukraine signed the agreement with the European Union association agreement, which granted us visa-free regime. So holders of biometric passport were allowed to freely move to European Union. But again, freely means that you don't need to apply for the visa, but all other requirements still valid. So like financial means, to prove the purpose of the visit by having, I don't know, invitation from conference, from your relatives, proving the relationship, again, money, and insurance. Of course, insurance is very important from your side, because if whatever happens abroad, you will be lucky to have insurance, which will cover all the cost. But also these even financial means, they are different by countries. And when the visa-free regime between Ukraine and Schengen area started, people were experiencing some problems on the different borders, because, for example, the minimum financial means you need to show to the border officer. For example, for, I don't know, Czech Republic, it was 40 euro per day, up to 30 days. And then 31 and more, it's like 15 euro. But then the very close country, the closest one to Ukraine, Poland, for them it was enough 4 euro per day, and no matter for how many days you are traveling. And recently, because of the war, like we were given another extra opportunity, this temporary protection. We are very happy to have this, and we understand that it was something extra invented only for us, because this is different from refugee status. It is different from international protection, different procedure, different rights. And by obtaining this temporary protection status, legal residents in the territory of country who granted you this temporary protection. Then next one, access to public labor market, access to medical care, and access to education. Some countries also provide financial support depending on your status, on the family size. Some just grant this for everyone, and for some countries it's limited, for some countries it's not. But then we again faced problems because on the paper everything is very easy. I applied for this temporary protection myself because I'm working in an IT company and we have offices all around the globe, so in Asia, Europe, and United States. But more than 500 employees are located or were located in Ukraine when the war started. Some of them moved abroad, and we need to think how to legalize their stay abroad because still it's not safety to go back to Ukraine, and someone doesn't want because they don't feel safe there. But because of the visa-free regime, and if you are a holder of a biometric passport, you are allowed to stay abroad only 90 days. So basically, you have the right to everything, but it comes in force only after you obtain this card. For example, I applied 1 month ago when I came here, and so far, no results. I tried to open the bank account to have to put some money on the, like, let's say, into a European bank, but they denied me, rejected to open the bank account because they say, we don't have the proof that you are like legally staying here. We need to have some document stating the expiration date for your legal stay here. And so like on the paper, I have access, I have rights for this and that, but in real life, I don't have this. But like anyway, we are very grateful and we understand that the law was like implemented, written only in the beginning of March, and then each and every country did their own procedure. For example, Poland, which is the closest country to Ukraine, they grant this temporary protection for everyone who crossed the border after 24. You don't need to go to a police office, to immigration service. You just, if you cross the border, if you have stamp, or even if you don't have the stamp, because that time a lot of people were traveling with their regular ID cards or even without documents. Mothers were traveling with children who didn't have ID because they are children. They didn't have birth certificates because they were just moved abroad firstly. And another aspect, for example, all my colleagues, we are employed, we have contractual relations with Ukrainian company, and we are willing to pay taxes to Ukraine to help our economy. Ukraine has double taxation agreement with several European countries, mostly with all of them, but this grants you legal residency up to 183 days. On the 184th day, the double taxation is not valid anymore, and you need to pay taxes both in Ukraine and country where are you living. Basically, it's written that you are, it's mandatory to pay taxes if you moved your tax residency abroad. But before it was like, I don't know, I buy property abroad, which means that now I'm living here, or I don't know, I get married, I started to study somewhere, so for sure my center of living, it's called, is moved. But now we were moved firstly abroad, and it's not my will and not the will of other Ukrainians to live abroad, but however, legally and officially, we are breaking the law if we don't pay the taxes. So now we don't know what to do, whether to apply for this temporary protection. However, still you can stay legally only 90 days. And then after this, you need to go back to Ukraine if you do not have any other document. So now we are facing these problems, and a lot of people are going back, even they are there in danger, but no one wants to break the law and then face all the circumstances, I don't know, fines or even administrative or criminal offense, because we don't know what is there. So basically we have the right to travel, we have the right to to have access to other, let's say, benefits, but it doesn't work that easy.
Thank you so much, Sophia, for sharing with us these your professional experience first. And
yeah, I was working 5 years at Visa Application Center in Ukraine with different embassies. So we were on their behalf accepting documents from the applicants. Then we were also collecting biometric data, which is also a problem for some people because there is, I don't know, believing that if you are submitting your biometrics data, fingerprints are something in connection with, I don't know, criminal offense. Why should I submit fingerprints if I did nothing? So some people denied to apply for visa because it was mandatory to submit fingerprints, but only if you have religious beliefs, you can deny this. Otherwise, no. But also you need to confirm this, that you are the member of this or that religious organization.
Violating other human rights, because you don't have to be forced to reveal your religious beliefs. But this is another field of discussion, and I don't think it's now the right place to open this discussion, even if I'm interested also in religious freedom. Well, I think that what has emerged, thanks to your contribution, is that first of all, we have to be aware of how lucky we are as European Union citizens, because free movement for us is something, again, that we take for granted. My students that are here, they are born with the Erasmus program, for instance, so they are European citizens from the very beginning of their lives. So I went to Romania in 2001 or in 2000, and at that time I need the passport, and it was very difficult for me when I went there, because I crossed the borders of the Romanian borders, because I went to the Czech Republic while staying in Romania. And then I went back to Romania. I arrived at the airport, and I was a young student, had no money, and just few money there. And they say, well, but you went out, you need another visa now. Another visa. Yes, you have to pay $50 for a new visa if you want to come back to Italy. And I didn't have any money. I was already in the airport. The plane was there, and I started crying because I didn't want to remain in Bucharest. And yeah, because I didn't have this very nice experience during that holiday. But then an Italian man came and offered me money to buy the visa, and he gave me the opportunity to come back to Italy. So it was in 2000. It was not too much time ago. But now you don't have this kind of problems if you want to travel in Europe. And the other thing that I think is important is that the temporary protection directive, the approval, the effect, the put into practice, because the directive existed, is even if there are difficulties that you have shared with us. But I think it is a clear proof that if member states want, they can effectively apply the principle of solidarity that is the foundation, I think, of this democratic space that is the European Union. So this very sad, terrific situation that is ongoing in your own country is teaching us something. First of all, your courage, your strength, and all you are doing in order to protect and promote also our right to be free, not to suffer from aggressions. But it's also teaching us that member states have the possibility to do things if they want, so that European integration can improve. Of course, we do not have to wait for tragedies to come at our borders, because you are our neighbor, and we hope you could join the European Union as soon as possible. But we do not have to wait for new crises, new tragedies to come before trying to make more efforts to improve the European Union integrations. So, well, it's now time to close the session, to open the debate session, and after that I will leave a few minutes to Susanna, because you will have to close this wonderful event. And I have a lot of things here written down in my sheet of paper, but I also saw Ariane that was taking notes. I saw you. So if someone wants to open the debate, of course, you can join us. Eriko, you can come. Marco, where are you? Has Marco disappeared? No, where you were sleeping. Come here. All together, this final round. So, someone, Francesco or Stefania, can you take the... Yeah, great. So, now the floor is yours, okay? Here we are, okay. Wolfgang.
Hello. Okay. Very good, the acoustic here. Thank you very much for giving me the chance again to put a question here. And thank you very much for Eriko for your presentation, which I enjoyed very much. It was very instructive and informative. But I have one issue here, because you compare very much not only national initiatives, but monocultural, I would dare say. In the particular case is the Belgian case, which I know a little bit in Eupen, because for one thing I speak a little bit German still, and for the other thing it's nearby when you are in Brussels. And here you see how important it is to have a common language for these initiatives. And that's the difference with Europe. The so-called Öffentlichkeit, another German word by Jürgen Habermas, helps a lot for democracy. You can communicate. And this is a difficulty at European level. We still have officially 24 languages. And this is not easy to communicate, particularly among citizens. Some of them don't have the same educational level as others have. I think this has to be pointed out. I'm not in favor of the citizen initiative as we have at the moment. And my question to you is, you mentioned that in Ireland, the proposals were given to the parliament, if I remember correctly, whereas the citizen initiative at the European level at the moment, the proposals are given to the commission. There's an enormous difference. One is a legislative and the other one has legislative function, but basically is the executive branch of governance. And I see here quite a difference. And I would like to ask you what this difference could make out, because you mentioned how important it is to have already members of parliament in the deliberation to be some kind of rapporteur for the interest of the citizens. Is that a positive way? So you would rather have parliament being addressed by the citizens than the executive branch? Thank you.
Yes, I think that we can collect some questions and then open the round for debate.
Sorry, I'm picking on these issues that you brilliantly presented also in a, how do I say, global environment. I wanted to return to what you mentioned, which is the Citizens' Initiative, which is just as a reminder that all our attempts at supranational democracy do not succeed. The European Citizens' Initiative really is one of the leftovers of the Constitutional Treaty, which was rejected in 2005. And that treaty also contained one chapter on participatory democracy. So it's interesting to see that we did not, well, we did not get the results that we expected because of the ICG, the Intergovernmental Conference, where the masters of the treaties are considered to be the member states. So it's a very open question. I suppose you were referring to that for the near future, whether we will again be blocked in a similar way, have the same kind of a stumbling block, which is we must have a unanimous agreement of the member states to the conclusions of a convention. So uncertainty is part of the fight for supranational democracy. One thing I wanted to remark, do you really consider that languages and multilingualism is an obstacle? I'm used to hearing people say the language barrier, but with the Conference on the Future of Europe, we had a platform which made it possible to translate, machine translation, but fairly good quality, and interact. I did interact a lot with German citizens, English, some Italian, and it was all immediately translated. So, and we have professionals as well. So I tend to consider that languages are doors that open rather than barriers. But this is it's a constant debate at European level, and we have to manage it. Also, just a reminder of another failure in 2002 or so, regarding the two agoras that were organized by a French Green MEP, Mr. Onesta. And I took part in both of them. One was on participatory democracy and the other on the environment. It was brilliant. I mean, in 3 days you were learning the whole, everything that you didn't know. But I remember this gentleman being extremely honest and deciding that the citizens would be in charge of the process. Of course, he had to compromise. And the MEPs were there. I don't know, are you aware of these two experiments? And I think, I consider they were very successful, even though there was no process for the longer term. But was it the kind of compromise between representative democracy and citizens' democracy or participatory democracy that you are hinting at? Is this a good example?
Thanks. First of all, I'd like to thank the organizers because the broad spectrum of the panelists that we've heard in this session really touched me, and so thank you for that and for sharing your stories and your knowledge. My question pertains the Innovagri WUMED project. And I was wondering whether there's any examples or case studies that have been implemented in Italy, or if it's just for developing countries. So it's whether there's cases in Italy. Thank you.
I knew.
You know, I have to live up to your expectations now. My name is Arjan. Thank you very much for sharing your stories, your insights, and and overviews as well. Maybe to continue with the latter question about empowerment of women, I also hear voices in the feminist movement who say that's a good thing, that needs to happen, but it's like mopping with the tap wide open. Should we not equally invest? And my question then to you is, can that happen at supranational level, or have you seen that as well, to actually close the tap and do something about oppressive patriarchy at the same time? Because the source of the issue otherwise doesn't stop. And questions for Eriko. In relation to your insights about the politicians that turned around, so thank you for sharing with so much openness. You were advocating against involvement of politicians, and then they turned out to be actually facilitators and supporting. If you take that to the experience of at supranational level in Europe, the conference, of course the biggest concern is indeed, as Catherine already pointed out, that the member states will once again be the spoilers. Could there be a sort of parallel? What should happen for them to actually advocate, support, and so forth? Is that then indeed also like the politicians make them part of the game at the first instance, and in a better way than it has been done in the design of the conference right now? Thank you.
So I think that Eriko can start answering, and then I will move to Marco.
Thank you all. These are all very challenging questions, and I will try to just tackle the three questions here all at once. And I must apologize that I will definitely not do that sufficiently. First of all, I think it is important just to note right from the beginning that I do not have a preferred format or setup or design or architecture for these things. I think what's important is to acknowledge the philosophy of that practice and the benefits that it can bring to, instead of just convening elected representative to take public decisions in any forum, whether it's subnational, national, or supranational, an body imitating the public through random selection in mini-publics, in citizen panels, can be benefits for some part of the decision making. Usually this is best sort of served for fundamental issues of avenues of sort of existential questions of for a group of people, rather than for technical decisions on sort of ordinary mundane policies. Regarding language barriers and sort of complexities in relations to multinational debates, then I would not at all diminish those obstacles. I think they are there, but they can be overcome. Debates in multinational, multilingual forums are possible, they do take place, and they can be facilitated. And so I wouldn't say that there is necessarily an obstacle here. And so I think that relates a little bit both to Wolfgang and Katrin there. And also what at least Katrin Arjen was touching on is the sort of reception, the obstacles, the sort of often sort of quiet opposition, the systemic sort of protection. The system protects itself. The sort of conventional systems in place have the tendency to try to push off innovations like this. And that happened in Iceland, and we didn't really see the opposition from mainstream political parties until it so kind of materialized. And the same, I am afraid, well, I'm a cynic anyway, I am afraid that member states will sort of find their way of dismissing, or at least not implementing, the outcome of the Conference of the Future of Europe that is coming now. But that does not mean that the attempt won't be meaningful, that it won't have an impact. I am as traditional political scientist as they come. I mean, I am absolutely mainstream through and through. Absolutely, I'm from the inner establishment of these things. I am trained in thinking in on certain tracks. I am trained to be the advocate of our conventional, traditional political system based on representative democracy of the modern era. But I am afraid that many of my colleagues are wrong when they think that deliberative democracy is not coming. The train has left the station. It's just a question of how this will evolve, how this will develop, and politicians, whether they are national or international, will slowly adopt this change, because it's ongoing, it's everywhere, and it's gaining momentum, and it's not radical. This is not changing the system. This is just an addition. It's just like updating a software to put a sort of better functioning parts into something that kind of works, but can't be sort of reformed and made better. So, I mean, we are not talking about any sorts of revolutions. We are not changing our democratic systems in absolutely fundamental ways. We're just adding onto them components that are of benefit. And I mean, just to, I'm sorry, I told you this would not be a very sort of constructive answer. Coming back to these languages, that just last week I was in a workshop in Austria, and we were debating these types of exercises. And I remember there was a colleague who was working on examining a citizen forum in sort of subnational regions in Tyrol, where they are speaking Italian, they are speaking German, and I can't remember what the third language was that they were using there. Yeah. So, I mean, and that didn't seem to be a problem for them. So, I mean, and I also think that, for me, I want to refrain from coming up with a sort of design, saying here's the design, please adopt that, because that's not the idea. And different setups can be useful in different regions and in different situations. But the lesson is that major steps are not taken without crises. They are the big sort of vehicle for implementing participatory instances into democracy. So perhaps Europe just needs a larger crisis, and one could be up on us very soon. Yeah. I'm sorry.
Ariane wants to.
In relation to that, following on, of course, there's some crises that you really, from any point of view, you don't want, like the current one with the war. But I think you already pointed to what kind of crisis you need. And I just want to see whether that's correct or whether you can even elaborate. Because if I remember well, you said it's crises that actually generate bottom-up pressure.
Yeah.
It's then that you get a deliberative. Yeah. Okay. And are there more characteristics of the crisis we need?
Sorry.
So, are there more characteristics for the crisis we need? We know which crisis we don't want. That's clear. That's what's going on now. But are there kind of crises that are helpful to progress on the deliberative path?
It's usually in wake of some sort of social unrest when the establishment feels threatened and their existence comes into question. Those types of crises that sort of disrupt the authorities. It's those types of crises that open up these avenues. So, I mean, for example, in Iceland, in the financial crisis, the political establishment stood accused of having designed a social structure that allowed for, I mean, almost oligarchical behavior in the economy. And the protests, they grew so large that the entire governmental structure was in question, whether it was sustainable or not, whether it could continue. And in those kinds of situations, politicians will do anything to preserve themselves. So it's that type of a crisis. If you can manufacture one of those, then yeah, that might be helpful.
Thank you, Eikur, and now Marco.
Okay, regarding the questions is about Italy. Yes, the project is developed in Sicilia area, in the Sicilia region. We have there 35 women. They are developing at least 10 entrepreneurs projects. So I think it's interesting for you if you want to know the stories of the women. That I mean, is the most interesting part. What they have done before to get in this project. Everyone has a big story behind. But then they tell also the story of which kind of idea they have, a business, the business idea. And we have a really interesting YouTube channel where we interview them. We put the interviews on the YouTube channel that you can find on YouTube, Innovagromed, the name of the project. And there you can start to listen which kind of business idea they have in the future. So I think it's interesting. Nothing else. Yeah, no.
And is it like up to funding? So could other realities, for example, in Puglia, apply?
Absolutely. We are in this stage. I'm responsible for the capitalization part of the project. So I think from this autumn, next autumn that will come, I will start to capitalize the project. So I will start to, that's mean that's also in Puglia can, start this process. Of course, at the moment, the project is co-funded by 3.5 million from the European Union, so there's quite big funding. So it will be interesting to see if we can put extra funding for the next year, because we are going to ask for an extension of the project for all the 2020, for at least half of the 2023. Okay, welcome. I don't know if you were asking something or if it was just a sentence about the patriarchal system. I don't know. I didn't get there.
Your reflection, because you're doing one half of the story as what I hear from feminist voices. So your reflection on this. I mean, when empowerment of women, beautiful thing, needs to happen. However, it's like mopping while you keep the tap open, the tap of oppressive patriarchy. So could you reflect on that?
Yeah. Absolutely. I visit, I have a study visit in the field in Tunisia. they took me really in the rural areas where the woman comes from. So they open their, housing. They cook the food, amazing food. And this was very interesting because many of them, before this project, they were afraid, or they had no possibility to work for family reason, linked to the patriarchy also as well. I mean, the man, the husband didn't want her to go and work. But the interesting part is that I heard at least 3 stories of women that after the pandemic time, the husband had a financial crisis with their business and starts to push the wife to do something for the family, to earn money, because they needed money. So this is a controversial part of the pandemic time that opened really doors for women before they were really closed in the houses, that they had no chance to work. And thanks to the financial crisis, they obliged almost them to go and do something for the family because they didn't have enough money. So it can be also interesting, this part, no? Yeah, crisis. Again, the pandemic crisis opened the door, yeah. As we saw, in the first part of the session. Yeah.
I'm scared if I have to figure out which will the next crisis be, because we have experienced almost everything now: economic crisis, health crisis, war. So. I think that we can learn from crisis, but we have learned enough. So now it's time to start trying to avoid future crises, because I don't think more crises are required. So
enough.
Please. Any other question? No? Issue, reflection?
Yes, another reflection.
Catherine,
still,
here you are.
about women. I have another anecdote that goes back to, at least 10 years ago in a northern African country, I won't say which, where I encountered 2 academics, ladies. And there was an academic coming from the ministry, and she was talking in very general terms about the condition of women in that culture. But I had side conversations with these 2 academics, and they said, what we do, we go in the suburbs, poor suburbs, we plant trees, or try to organize the plantation of trees, and the collection of garbage. So basically what they were saying, we are trying to compensate for the absence of public services. It's another dimension. I'm aware you can't do everything. But empowering women also takes public services, kindergarten, transportation. Yeah. Alternately, the woman works with the right hand, takes care of the kids with the left hand, and so on and so forth. Yeah. I don't know if you are in a position.
As I said before, many of the women that are involved in the project, they didn't have their driver license before to start the project. So we look at each other. I mean, the partners. We say that they needed a driver license to reach any possible new labor that we can provide. So this is a real important part of their development. Also, in this kind of terms, not just skills. Business models, these kind of things, skills on the job or business model, but they need also that you develop first the consciousness of their rights that they don't have at all. So they need to understand which are their rights to make them, aware also where they go. And second part is also to develop the private life, no? Mm-hmm. Like, take care of your kids when they are away. For example, when we do trainings, they stay away all day. And this is an important part. So when we started to organize the trainings, we start to think about what shall we do to avoid they don't go to the trainings just because they have kids at home. They can bring the kids, and we have like a kindergarten and training center. So bus system, kindergarten, make them pushed to do something for their own future. That is the only way. Otherwise, they will stay back isolated in the rural areas, and there is no development at all.
Well, I think that I will promote the opening of a Unisalento kindergarten, even if I don't need it anymore, but it's for future generations. So spera, we were waiting for you. Come on.
Last but not least. No. Just a provocation for Catherine Eric. The Gilets jaunes, was that kind of crisis, or was just a small phenomena, and then, or the next one will be in France, but France is not Iceland, with due respect to Iceland, but the weight of France or Germany after we saw the French election with especially more than Le Pen is Mélenchon, that kind of voters that is particular or peculiar. So that's thank you.
I mean, this is actually a good example because I mean, in wake of the Yellow Vest protests in France, they put up an a randomly selected body in France debating environmental issues, climate change, these kinds of stuff. And that was absolutely based on this ideology or this practice of convening citizens in mini-publics and getting them to debate on meaningful issues. One of the sort of foremost scholar on this field is Hélène Lannemore. She's a French citizen. She's at Stanford University, I think. Very sort of prominent in all of these fields, and she was amongst those people designing the citizens panels in France. And I think, for example, a leader like Emmanuel Macron has adopted the idea. I mean, he is really the designer behind this Conference on the Future of Europe, really, if I understand this correctly. So we are reaching into the absolute established mainstream with these types of endeavors. But what's lacking is to institutionalize these bodies so that their outcome really has direct impact. We're still in the phase of having like indirect impacts, which is, I mean, significant and meaningful, but we haven't reached all the way. And that's why I titled my talk here, Constituting Deliberative Democracy.
Ariane.
Thank you. This is exactly what I was trying to talk about, because in the French case, presidential democracy is different from parliamentary democracy, as we see it in most other MS and member states of the EU. And here, as you said, they were appealing to the president. The president is very strong. It's the executive directly, because the French parliament wouldn't be as powerful in that sense. And that's my question still. Should we address with these citizens the parliamentary level or the executive branch?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't reflect on that directly. The reason is, I think that there's just so different situations, and sometimes you're calling in mini publics to prepare to debate on issues that have to go through a parliament, and then the parliament is the recipients. Other times you don't have that situation. For example, if it's the executive that is using it to sort of develop their own policies, if you will. So, and that's in a different environment, different situation, and one does not exclude the other. It just depends on what you're using it for. And some of these bodies are part of the governmental structure. Most often we see these bodies still just as ad hoc. They are established by somebody who wants to use them. Sometimes you have these bodies completely bottom up and there is no governmental or authoritative input in place whatsoever, but still they manage, because of the legitimacy that this exercise holds, to have impact. So it just depends, and so I don't have, it depends on who is legally in place, empowered to implement what you're doing. So for example, in Iceland, the body was trusted with developing a draft constitution, which has to go legally through Parliament. So Parliament is the recipient there. So and then you have this another situation in France now, and so yeah, it just depends on the situation.
But what the commonality is, before you institutionalize, you know, so when we have our next crisis, which we're going to avoid, I agree with Claudia, we should avoid the next crisis, but when it does come upon us, and it is one that generates that social pressure, that pushes the elite threatened in their existence to actually allow for a deliberative exercise, when the pressure is on so much, we should push as far as that those who are finally going to decide commit to how they are going to take the outcomes into account. So that's what didn't happen with the Yellow Vest in France.
No.
There were the climate tables, but it was not agreed beforehand on how Parliament was going to, the Assemblée Nationale was going to take into account the outcome of those tables. We have the same funny game now with the Conference on the Future of Europe. Yeah. It's like playing a football game until the 85th minute, it's 1-0, but you still haven't decided that the one who scored the goal is actually going to win. It's really ridiculous. So when the pressure is on, elite is finally there that they are going to say, okay, we're going to let those citizens talk. Then at that moment you need to make sure that they also commit to how they are going to take that into account. And whether that's institutionalized, but it will depend on the situation, whether it's your president, your parliament, or whoever is finally taking the political decision. But make them commit when the pressure is on. That's for the next crisis.
Yeah, I think that this is the same issue that we have with the European Citizens Initiative, where the European Commission is not obliged to present a proposal after 1 million of citizens have signed the initiative. So this is a shortcoming of current structure of the European citizen. Notwithstanding this, it is a very important instrument for dialogue. In this case, for instance, the European Parliament could play a very important role because there is a tool in the treaty that is Article 225 that allow the European Parliament to present, to ask the Commission to present a proposal. So in this case, if the European Commission doesn't accept to give effect to a European Citizens Initiative, the European Parliament could take the content of this initiative and ask the European Commission to present a proposal. So we will have a double pressure. The first coming from citizens, so the bottom up, and the second one coming from the European Parliament that represents 10,000 times the million of citizens. Do you have to add something, or may I?
No, not really. I just want to say, I mean, this is really, to me, it's just a question of establishing sort of a normative change in what we consider to be proper public decision making. And when you have established this, when it becomes an established, accepted attitude that citizen panels are helpful and useful and they should be applied, that's when we will sort of, then all of the rest will just come on its own. Yeah, it will follow. So that's the thing. And I mean, like in France, you see that slowly the top guy there is sort of seeing the benefit of this. I mean, this is coming. It's coming.
So I think that we can conclude by saying that there is an added value in involving citizens and local communities. Saverio yesterday underlined how important it is in the field of environmental issues to involve local communities. So this is very important to hear the voices of citizens and communities. The missing point is how to allow, and this is a very big issue. In other fields, I think, in relation to what we have been saying those incredible 2 days, I think that we can say that laws, mechanisms exist. We have solutions. We can affirm that we have solutions, but in some cases, we need that people, civil society organizations keep on pushing towards the effective implementation of those laws and mechanisms, because we are not living in a void. Solution exists. The problem is that sometimes there is the need, effective need, that someone has to act in order to promote. And I want to leave my audience by inviting you, before giving the floor to Susanna, I know that I have to reflect on two things, two topics. The first is on borders, because I think that through what we have heard from Veronica and from Sophia, we need to reflect on the very essence of borders, of the problems that comes when we insist on keeping borders and on reinforcing sometimes borders. And the other thing is that maybe we can go on with our dialogue. So this is a kick-off for the next supranational democracy dialogue. We can have at the heart of our dialogue the idea of common goods, because it's around common goods that we can have a fruitful dialogue. So thank you for staying with us. Now I give the floor to the
thank you, Claudia.
The reason why we are here, that is Susanna, of course.
Thank you so much, and also thank you for the suggestions for the next edition. We are very well known for launching the heart beyond the obstacle, so we will do it. Okay, so let me very shortly recap. I think we had lots of food for thought in these 2 days, and we started with governance and seeds of supranationality. We discussed about the interconnectedness and interdependence in the human family through the prism of nature and technology. And I think this last session was precious, because we saw that there are solutions, as Claudia told us just a minute ago, innovative democracy tools, as very well Eriko explained. And I think also that this idea of citizens panels could have a future in the European Union, because it also was born out of a crisis. I think it was born out of the rising Euroscepticism after the managing of the financial crisis and through austerity, and the rising of Euroscepticism and this mandate of the Commission to close the gap between the citizens and the institutions. And there are already many voices raising about the utility that could be having the panels as a permanent tool, not, as you told us, not on everything, but on some specific issues when needed. So just another tool in the panoply of the European democracy, participatory democracy tools. So it's an upgrade. And I think we learned in these 2 days that democracy is a continuous upgrade. It's a permanent work. And I would like, after this last session, saying a few words about citizenship. I think we saw the bad side of citizenship. As Eric explained us at the very beginning, we have had in the history several waves of democracy, and both in the Greek experience and in the second wave after the French Revolution experience, citizenship was a very good thing, was empowering people to be part of the system. But now citizenship, in an age of interdependence, in an age of movement of people, citizenship becomes not a way to include those inside, but more a way to exclude those outside, which is terrifying, which is discriminatory in nature. So just as we in Europe experienced that these two-level citizenship, the national and the European one, I think the next stop is imagining some kind of global citizenship. So belonging also to some global sphere where there are global goods, global issues, and global responsibilities. And so, yes, this is a topic for a next conference, definitely. So let me thank you all for coming, and let me thank all the panelists for providing us so many insights and suggestions, and well, this global citizenship, as Wolfgang has told us at the very beginning, is maybe the most natural way of thinking beyond the national dimension. So the multi-level, the multi-stakeholder, the multi-participatory, but there are also other approaches not less interesting. There is not just the supranational approach. There is also the transnational approach, because what Marco told us is that it's possible for communities, it's possible to cooperate across the borders, so under the state level. So the real obstacle often in both cases is the state. So the state should just become at an administrative level like other administrative levels, not anymore a fetish to defend at any cost. So this is the cultural revolution I think we are talking about. So thank you all, and I hope to meet you again next year. And we will have other challenges, other provocations to discuss about. And the success of this kind of initiatives is the result of a collective effort. So thank you, Claudia, thank you, Stefania, Francesco, Vincenzo, who is not here today, but Saverio, all the team. And thank you all for coming, and thank you all for contributing. See you soon.